All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Dr. Mark. My last name is actually Aberhage. It's German. Germans pronounce E's like A's if they're in Germany. I am not in Germany, but I'm determined to make people. So I go by Dr. Mark because nobody can do Aberhage. That's a tough name. I get it. My son goes by Aberhage. He's sticking it to the man, making sure everybody has to say it. But anyway, so I'm a psychologist. I provide psych services. You may have seen me bopping around here. I have been in and out of this building since the 90s, and through numerous companies. And in 2000, I opened BehavioralSolutions, and we provide your psych services. So if you ever see psychiatric consultants in here, or a psychologist, which is usually me, but it's been us. So we've been here for a long time, happy to be here for a long time, and hopefully we can continue. I haven't personally done an in-service since pre-COVID. So you're my first 1 in 2 years. I used to do them like a couple a week, so we'll see if I can still do it. Anyway, what I want to do is give you some practical knowledge about things. So part of how psychologists tend to view things, and everybody comes from like a mindset, and I want to just give you sort of some insights into mindsets that can be helpful, because it's different. The mindset of working with people and coming from a psychological perspective is very different than the mindset of someone who's never been trained in psychology before. So most of us have this sort of approach to things that are, they say this, I have a retort. I have something to say back. They do this, I do this. Like I have a friend right now who read my email wrong and thinks that I was mean to them when I was just very professional, because I know them. So I said the facts, and they saw that as sarcastic. So, well, and I do have a sarcastic tone, so they must have said it in what they remember my voice to sound like. So I didn't mean it sarcastic, though. And so now they're very angry with me. So that I have a mindset of a psychologist, so I'm going to figure out the chess game before I respond back, as opposed to de-escalate it, as opposed to coming back at them with something. Because that's how we normally do it. They wronged us, we'll show them, and we'll kind of, the fantasy, I guess, is eventually we will win. But you can't win with these residents. They gotta win. They gotta win. We're the staff. So, I think of all interaction as treatment. People think very easily about treatments that they're doing that are physical. That's easy to think of as treatment. But tone of voice, how we present ourselves, ways that we come into the room, how we leave it, that's all treatment. Yeah. So when you focus your task on treating residents, you try not to get compliance. Now that's easier for some people. Some people not getting compliance, they're not worried about getting compliance. But many people, the dirty little secret about caregivers is we usually like to be in control. So that means we usually like compliance. I love compliance. People should just do what I say. My wife says that I should have a hat that says, do what I say and you'll be okay. But compliance isn't the way to work with residents. We have to build an alliance, a partnership. We're part of it. Just a way to kind of think about this. So you're trying not to control the person. Trying not to set it up as your will versus their will. And a lot of times, once you learn some of these principles, you'll catch yourself in this stuff if you believe in it as an ideal, as like, I would like to get more like this. It's going to be a path in which you're going to catch yourself. You'll be like, ah. And the big one always is to ask yourself, what part do I play in the conflict? So I go into Mildred's room. She's a real pain in the butt. I can't get anywhere with her. It just keeps escalating. I walk out, and then we have that conversation. You know Mildred. Yep, that's how Mildred is. That gets us nowhere. Instead, if you ask yourself, well, what part do I play in that escalation? You might actually come up with something that would be useful, as opposed to the same old going around, chasing your tail, never coming up with an answer, just being frustrated. So it's a way out of the box, is to think, what part do I play in that? Which is usually the irony of going to see a therapist. You go see the therapist, you go, my partner's a real pain in the butt. And the therapist may eventually come around to, what part do you play in setting them off? And what? It's all about them. They're the ones who's wrong. Yeah, no, it's what part can you get? Because that's all we can change. You can only change your own behavior. We can't change the resident's behavior directly. We can only change our behavior. That's what we have control over. It has nothing to do with whether it's fair or not, or whether it's right or equitable. It's effective. That's what's important. Is it effective? So what I'm teaching you isn't stuff like it's going to make you feel good. It's more like, if I do that, it will work. Right? It's going to be effective. That's what's more important. So, here's an interesting little piece of social psychology research that came out years ago. And that is the idea that we think others act as they do because their personality. And we think we act as we do because the situation calls for it. So if you go to Best Buy and you see me yelling at the person at the counter, you say, wow, that Dr. Mark, he's a real hothead. That's my personality. If you had to raise your voice at the counter, you say, well, they were being unreasonable. So the situation required me to raise my voice. See what I'm saying? We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We do this all the time with residents. We talk about how we know it's their personality and their fault, but, you know, that they're being unreasonable. That's why I had to raise my voice. This is really, I love this piece of information, right? Because it really kind of puts it back on you, or me, to have to change something. So a helpful mindset is to meet the person in their reality, not try to set them up into the reality, you know, or our reality. Nowadays, everybody seems to be off in some different reality. Like, none of us seem to have a shared reality anymore. So that's pretty challenging. But you have to meet the person in their reality. That doesn't mean lying to them. I'll teach you about this. So you're trying not to set up a power struggle, a you versus them. You have to be flexible. Now, all of these things I'm talking about, for some people, are really easy. You know, I'll dance with you any way you want to dance. But not everybody finds that easy. They're not flexible. You know, I'm like, with my wife, I like to say, I'm a pretty bold person. I'm an alpha, you know, but when it comes to my wife, who's gorgeous, and I love her, I always say, I'm your vehicle. I'll take you anywhere you want to go. So literally, wherever you want to go. I'm in the car, I'll drive you everywhere. We'll go to the Mac counter and get you the lipstick. We'll go over there and get 3 dresses, whatever. It's cool, I love it. That's me being flexible and being the person who wants to make you get your goals. Some people say that love, this is just something to think about, just an aside, what's the definition of love? One of the definitions is supporting your partner in their development as an individual. You support them in their development as an individual, not what they do for you. All right. You can't change them. You can't change them directly. You can only change them by you changing how you behave. That will change them, perhaps. So if you've ever played chess, it's like that. You're making a move to get the other person to move. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't ask them directly. You can't make them do it because, if you ever had a kid who is oppositional, if you ever had a child who's going to do the opposite, my son and I used to go around on this, and he was smart enough, he knew it. Being raised by a psychologist has got to suck. And I used to just say the opposite to him deliberately. I'd be like, well then, you shouldn't eat anything. Right? He'd be like, oh, but then he'd have to start eating, and he'd be like, oh, I'm falling for this. He knew. But he couldn't help it. Here's another one. Many of us, and culturally I believe this is true too, might be more prone to see others' behavior as personal. It's a personal interaction between us. you're being mean to me or sarcastic or rude. And it has to be personal for me to really want to work with you. Like one of the things that's different if you go for different nursing homes, the cultures, especially on the east side, are different. And if you've ever worked at the different nursing homes, you'll find that some people are really big on your credentials, and other people are really, in your experience, and other people are really big on whether they like you. Whether they like you on a personal level, you're a mensch, whether you're somebody they can really relate to, So what you have to think about is not taking behavior personally. What people say or do is a reflection on them, not you. And that's a really tough one. But if you can wrap your head around that idea, that people act the way they do, and then that's not personal. Even if it's frustrating to you or insulting to you, they got themselves upset over this, and it's not personal. They might blame you for it, but it is really not personal. You have to figure out a way to step yourself, your ego, out of that conversation. So that's something I think about a lot, which is talk to somebody, they're completely hostile and angry. Like I'll walk in and say, I'm Dr. Mark, I'm a psychologist. I don't need an effing psychologist. I'm not crazy. Who thinks I needed that? Who sent you? And I don't get into the whole, well, you did, sir. You signed the consent. None of that. It's just like, I hear you. You sound like you're pretty upset. So I'll get into that a little later, into how to approach that stuff. A resident's behavior is a window into what they need, not the truth about you. This is the truth in all relationships. So I'm also teaching you a lot today, but not a lot, but I'm telling you stuff about just relationships, customer service issues, but also just in relationships in general. When a person lobs a complaint at you, what you want to do is defend yourself and tell them why they're wrong. No, you don't. That's not going to work. That'll escalate them. Instead, what you should do is that you should see this as them expressing their needs. They're giving you an opportunity to understand what they need, what they want, not telling you your deficits. That's how they're telling you their needs. They're telling it to you as a complaint about you, but that's not what you should hear. What you should hear is, what are they telling me about their needs? So when somebody's angry, particularly at you, try to hear beyond you and figure out, what are they telling me about what they want, about what their needs are? So let's say you come to see me at the office, and you had a 2 o'clock appointment. The guy before you, you don't know this, is telling me he wants to kill himself, so I'm in the middle of that, and now it's 10 after 2, and you're still sitting out there waiting. You don't know what I'm dealing with. So I can't tell you either, right? So I come out, and now it's 10 after 2, quarter after 2. Now you're not going to get your whole session, and you have a dentist appointment later, so you're going to have to go at the regular time. So you're irritated. And you tell me this, right? And I could defend why I'm late, but it's missing the point. And it is unfair to me to be yelled at. I'm trying to do a good job here with this other guy, but I'm missing the point. The point is, what are you telling me you need? You need my attention. You need me to care about you. You need to think that I'm not just sitting around on the phone, goofing around, trying to avoid you. So I need to reiterate that right at that point and really be all about you, which is hard to do if you're being yelled at. At that point, we want to come up with excuses, give reasons, explain how they're wrong, how unfair it is to me to be yelled at after I'm trying so hard. I got to let go of my ego and try to attend to what they need, and they're telling me they need my attention, me to care, right? So there's a lot of times you can just cut to it with a resident and get to the, I hear that you were put out and you were waiting. I'm sorry that happened. One of the biggest things, you guys get people here, they get stuck on rehab, they're not going to do the work, they're just going to lay in bed all day, they're angry at the universe for what happened to them. And one of my biggest tricks is I come in and they tell me about how they had this stroke and how their whole life is going to change, and I just apologize for the universe. I'm so sorry that happened to you. No one else tells them that. Everyone else tells them you got to get your butt in gear and work on these days in rehab. That's what their daughter's telling them or whatever. So what I do a lot of times is, I get it, you're pissed, and you have a right to be. Right? I'm not going to give them a rebuttal for it. All right. When psychologists think about behavior change, we think about it like this, because most people don't dissect it. Like when you look at a wound, I don't know, I would think there's a way to look at a wound, and you could look at different parts of it, and you kind of know what's going on and what it's telling you. I don't know how to do that. When I look at a behavior, I'm trained to do that, which is to dissect the behavior. So I ask many times, what happened before the behavior? Then there's the behavior, that thing the person did. And then there's the what happened after the behavior. If you start to look at it this way, ABC, antecedent means before, consequence means after. If the person before they did the behavior, is there something that triggered it, that set it off? Is there something, and this is the piece we miss, because if you ask staff about what happened before or what happened after, why is she doing the behavior, nobody knows, just Mildred, that's the way she is. You know how Mildred is. And then we all nod our head, and then we're in a circle, and we never solve it. But we might be able to solve it, and that could be true. That is the way Mildred is. But could we figure out if there's something triggering it before the behavior? Or could we look at what happens after? Years ago, when I first started being a psychologist in nursing homes, there was a nursing home in which a person was a quad, and they would scream. And then everyone would say, well, what do you need? And they'd say, ice cream. They actually screamed for ice cream. And then they would feed them ice cream. So what do you think happened?
They screamed all the time.
They screamed all the time, right? For more ice cream. Right, of course. They were reinforced. The behavior of screaming was reinforced. The behavior of needing anything was reinforced by screaming. The person could speak, but squeaky wheel gets the grease. People who yell and scream get the attention. Right? We kind of ignore them until then. Especially if they're prone to being a pain in the butt, then we like to ignore them and go past that room and not upset it. As opposed to maybe doing what might be more beneficial, which is when they're behaviorally being compliant and good and in a good mood, checking in with them for 30 seconds or 10 seconds and just saying, hey, how you doing? Good to see you today. Hey, something like that. Reinforcing the good behavior. Asking if they need something when they're in a good mood. So that can be very difficult to change. I had a person one time would take off their clothes and hide under their bed. And then they would say, we go, Mildred, what can we do for you? Well, I want some orange juice. And they would go get some orange juice and put it under the bed, and she'd drink her orange juice under the bed. And I would say, we're reinforcing the under the bed behavior. How about if we say, hey Mildred, why don't you sit, get your robe on and go sit in a chair. I'll be back in a couple of minutes to see what you need. And then kind of don't get lost on something else. Hang around outside, out of eyesight. And when I see she's back in there and she's done it, then come in right away and go, hey, what do you need? Oh, orange juice? Great. And then give her orange juice. I'm oversimplifying some of these, but just to give you the concepts that might be helpful. So you can only change behavior if you change the antecedent or the consequence. You can't usually change behavior just by telling the person to be different. I mean, people can agree with you in principle, but they usually just can't do it. Techniques that work with demented people. Try to use simple, short phrases. If you're like me, run on sentences, that doesn't work. I actually have a trick that I like to do in conversation. I caught myself on it years ago, and I've tried to stop, which is if you really want to take the floor and never release it to anybody else, stop in between sentences. Stop in the middle of a sentence, pause in the middle of a sentence, don't pause between sentences. Then no one can get a word in. So don't do that. Use simple short phrases. Try to be concrete, which means just literal about everything. I love to use metaphors, right? Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Not everyone understands what those kind of things mean, especially people who are demented, because that's an abstraction. So a lot of people don't understand phrases like that anymore. You've got to break ideas down into steps. So if you come in and go, all right, first we need to get you to do this, then we're going to need you to do that, then we'll put you in the chair, then we're going to wheel you down. That's already too much, right? You need time for a response. If you're like me, I give nobody time for response because it's all not fast enough. I like things quick. I like it fast. I like that you already got it before I finish the sentence. To take patience, it takes a couple seconds for someone to, and demented people take some time. I always say it's longer than I think it should be. That's how I know it. Is I go in, I talk to somebody, I wait a couple seconds. Now they maybe respond to me that's like, oh my God! But that's what you got to do. Trouble is, if you wait too long with demented folks, they say there's about an 8-second memory with people who have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So wait too long and they won't remember what you're even talking about or doing, which could be a mixed blessing or it could be really challenging. Got to keep it light, use humor, never use humor at their expense. Reduce the stimulation. Not everybody needs to go to an activity. Some people are deliberately reducing their stimulation because it's overwhelming to them. And talk about what they know, the past. Usually they know the past. I just recently met somebody with dementia that didn't know the past anymore, and that's kind of rare. Most people I talk to at least remember the past. Use a gentle voice. This is hard with people who are hard of hearing. What you try to do is, this is hard, right? Where's the smile? The thing that just says I'm friendly. Try not to use a condescending tone. Some people are wonderful at this. I'm not. I'm a therapist and I have this sarcastic tone to my voice. My wife says, it comes from northern Germany. I'm first generation here. My dad was really good at it. It's this tone that says, silently at the end, my wife says, I have a silent at the end, unspoken, you idiot, you should know that. So I don't know how I have succeeded as being a therapist, but there you go. Try not to rush them, maintain eye contact. Try not to embarrass people. Saving face is so important for people, to not embarrass them. Sometimes we have to direct people, just give them a directional statement. And when they're frustrated or when I'm frustrated, it's time to take a little time out and slow down. So if things are escalating, that's when I catch on to it's escalating, I try to take a breath and back off a little bit, as opposed to push further, push harder. Logic usually doesn't work when people have dementia. A guy tells me he had a pea-sized device implanted in his brain, and the government is controlling him. You can't really argue that. You're not going to get anywhere. Where's the incision? Well, it's up my nose. They put it up my nose. Look at the environmental triggers. Are there things in the environment that could be setting off a person who's upset? Sometimes it's holiday decorations. For years I've railed about, like it's Halloween and it's October, maybe we should stick with fall decorations and not like tombstones and rest in peace and, grave sites and skeletons. Seems pretty, I don't know about you, see when you're younger it doesn't matter. You get older, that stuff is a little, like it does freak you out a little more than it used to. And I love Halloween. I'm married to like Elvira, so my house is a East Side Victorian, with a Gothic Victorian. Looks like a funeral parlor, mixed with a opium den and I don't know what, circus. There's no opium. You try to focus on the skills that they have, not the ones they lost. Using a lot of praise. The praise thing's really interesting if you think about how people are motivated. So I'm saying that, but I think about how people are motivated, and there's kind of two schools, right? Like I went to the gym, and I was going to lose some weight, and I was going to get fit, and that didn't work apparently, but what I was going to do was get a trainer. So when they said to me, well, what kind of trainer do you want? There was this woman about my size who was running around the track, and her trainer said, move that ass. And I said, I don't want that. Because that would be really embarrassing in front of everybody in the gym have somebody saying that to me. Right? Then there was another person who said, good job. And I was like, that's the one I need. I need that guy. So that's how I get praised. My wife, she loves the move that ass thing. That really gets her motivated. Right? So people are different. So you have to think about sometimes how that person might respond. But most people respond to praise. Don't try to orient people to reality. So let's talk about this validation technique. The idea of validation technique is that people have feelings, and the feelings that they have are valid. They can't be questioned, and they can't be judged. They are what they are. So you have to accept their feelings for the way they are. And you're validating not the reality or the truth, but their right to feel the way they do. So you're not going to orient them to reality, or our reality, or the reality. Instead, you need to provide understanding for their feeling. So that's the piece I'm doing when I go in the room and I say, I'm sorry this happened to you. Right? Because I'm saying, I get it. It sucks. And most people are afraid to do that because they're afraid, like, if you admit to somebody, it's like they need to go here and they're here, and if I say, I get that you're upset, oh, see, now they're justified, and they'll just sit in it. But really what happens usually is that it's really weird. If a person comes in and goes, well, I'm just on strike, and I've had it, and that's it, there's no reason to live life, and I'm not going to do anything. And I would go, well, George, you need to do this and this and this. Does that work? It does not work. What usually works is, oh, I get it. Yeah. You don't have any motivation to move on. You just feel completely stuck. And that does not get them more stuck. Because if you can then wait that out, a lot of times what you'll get is, but I really need to get it together. And then sometimes I push further. I'll go, oh, I don't know. Do you think you can? And they'll be like, well, I should. I really need to get motivated. Oh, and it's going to be really hard. You know, I'll just really go that other way. It's very provocative. But what I'm doing is, I'm there with your feeling. I get it. You don't need to prove it to me. You don't need to prove how much it hurts. I get it. Maybe it hurts too much for you to ever do anything. And then they're like going to prove me wrong. Now, how I do that is this little trick. And this is the trick that psychologists have, therapists have, that most people don't have, which is suspending judgment or agreement. I don't really think about whether I agree with anybody. I think about, do I understand them? And understanding and agreeing are two different things. When I first heard that, mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. That's a powerful concept. The idea that I don't have to agree with anybody. I just need to try to understand them. I'm trying to understand their perspective. The difference, like I said, God says I have a pea-sized device that's been implanted in my brain by the FBI, and they're controlling me. I can't agree with that. More than likely it didn't happen. It could have, but more than likely it didn't happen. So I'm not deciding whether it's right, wrong, factual, whether I agree with it or disagree with it. And we have all been trained, particularly in the last 20 years in this country, to decide what side we're on about everything, whether you agree or disagree. And that divides everybody. In treatment, we can't be divided. We have to be on the same page. So what we got to do is try to learn a new way, which is not trying to convince people where they need to go, but try to walk alongside them And so that's what we're doing with this, is I'm suspending whether I agree or disagree. I'm just thinking, what must it feel like to believe a pea-sized device has been implanted in your brain and you're being controlled? That's got to be really scary. Now I'm on the same page. I get it. I get it. They don't have to prove anything to me. And there, right there, is how to be a psychologist. That piece. If you did anything, somebody's angry, someone's upset, can I just understand why, what, where, when, how they're feeling, and suspend whether I agree or disagree? It takes practice. It's really not easy, but it's really powerful. So when you're talking to people who are demented, psychotic, delusional, disagree, you're giving them the right to have their feeling. You're not saying their feeling's correct. You're not saying they're right. Your opinion's right. You're not worrying about right or wrong. When I do couples therapy, I'm not worried about who's right and who's wrong. You can't do couples therapy that way. You're going to lose one of them. You can't go, well, you're right, and you're wrong. So that's settled. Like, that doesn't work. You have to, and in fact, if you do couples therapy, you'll start to come of the opinion, oh, they're both right from their perspective. So now what? Now what do we do, right? So we have to listen to what they're saying and try to see, and some of us can do this really well, and others, it takes some practice, which is, can we understand their underlying emotion? What feeling are they having? There's this belief in therapy, when people speak, there's content, which is what they're saying, the words they're saying, and process, which is what's really going on underneath it. So you're focusing on the feeling, not the factual accuracy. At any point, feel free to chime in, right? So validating isn't lying to them. That would be agreeing with them. It's not white lies. Some people say, oh, validating, I'm just going to tell them a little white lie. That's not the same. You're not agreeing with them. You're trying to build rapport. You're listening. And listening requires no rebuttal. It means I hear you, and I'm trying to understand how you see it. You're showing empathy. Some of us, that's hard. I mean, who has a job where they cry on a regular basis, right? I mean, I cry on a regular basis. I don't know why I picked this job. I should just sell popcorn or something. It would have been a lot easier. There's a lot more fun things to do, right? Than to see misery all day and cry. But I think about my wife. She's a compliance manager at Manpower, right? And she's not crying. They're all yucking it up on their Zoom call. You know, I'm in their tears for the third time today, you know. Oh my God. Thanks for listening. You try not to lie or mislead. And these are if you don't know how to do it, that's how you do it. You're like, I like that idea, but how do we do this? You ask the reporter questions. They're like, you know, the little green boys came into my room last night and they stole my purse. Who? What? Why? When? What happened? Oh my God. And I learned one of my best phrases I learned from this guy named Jerry Taft. Do you remember him? Yeah. Older people do, or let's say this, the seasoned people do. They, he was a, what, Channel 12? Channel 12 news anchor for years, like Ted Perry's been for years. He was that guy for years. And I met him a number of times. He was always out for dinner with a young intern. And I turned, and there he was. And so we kept laughing at each other because we kept meeting. And finally, got to start to have conversations because we kept showing up at dinner together. I didn't have a young intern with me, but anyway, but he did. And I asked him, like, how do you respond to these people who think they know you because you're in their living room every day, and you don't know them at all, and they overshare? You know, they tell you, oh, I lost my baby, you know, or whatever. And he would say, he would say what George Takei says. He would say, "Oh my." And that's what he would say. That was it. Oh my. And that's a great one. That's what I say. So whenever I'm kind of, if you hear me saying it, it's me. I'm going back to my Jerry. Is it Taft or Taft? I don't know. Yeah, I'm going back to my news reporter. I didn't learn that from a therapist. So, but it's a good one. Oh my, because it shows I care. I'm trying to get it, right? And it's non-judgmental. So sometimes we have to use redirection. I used to use this with my son all the time. He'd be complaining about his ice cream cone or something. You know, he got 3 scoops at the ice cream shop, and somehow he was irritated. And I would say, no, the answer is thank you. Or something like that. The response is thank you. Okay, Dad, thank you. Sometimes distraction. I'm a big believer in distraction. If I had to make these in small or little, but distraction would be really big font. I feel like inside, I always say this, the mind is a terrible place and should be avoided at all costs. So I'm not big on insights or like let's ponder life when you're sitting here with half your body not working in rehab, right? And you're just going to ponder life. Why did this happen to me? Let's forget about that. That's a bummer. Let's instead, and I'm giving you this advice, when you start having the bummer thoughts, do something. Distract yourself. Look at the TikTok. There's always some stupid thing on there. You know, my wife said it to me last night. She's like, "Why are you looking at TikTok?" I was like, "Because I'm trying to relax before I go to bed, and it's so ridiculous." It makes me laugh. At least everyone gets a different feed, right? So, you know. Right. Do you ever try to change your feed? Like, whoa, what is this? All car crashes, people laughing at people getting hurt. Why? I'm not even gonna watch that. So anyway, reinforcing meaning, you know, when somebody says something you like or does a good behavior that you recognize it. Cueing, you know, you guys do that with demented folks a lot, right? Just telling them the next thing. Or validation, as I said, which is just supporting the way they feel, understanding it. Not making, and this is how I think about feelings, I'm not going to make you have to prove to me this is how you feel. I just accept it. Because if you give a person a sense that you don't like it, you don't agree, it's not right, they will escalate to prove their right to feel the way they do. That's what arguments are all about. They're all about people escalating to prove their feeling. So, you're at the restaurant. You and your partner are there. One of you gets the meal, the other one, they blew it. They don't have it. So then you ask, this happens to almost everybody, right? So then you ask, excuse me, what's going on here? And you get they have 2 choices. One is the guy who comes out and says, well, you have to understand, we're short-handed back there. To which you think, I'm never coming here again. I don't give a shit. Sorry. Or you get the guy who comes out and he's like, I'm sorry you've been put out. Here's a chocolate cake. They get it. They get that I've been put out. I don't have to prove that I've been put out by getting up and leaving. Right? I don't have to escalate. That's the point. We don't want people to have to escalate around here to prove they have a right to be upset about why they're here. So, again, when people are, then sometimes you get these people who really love control. So you have to think about, you want to build an alliance with them. They can be very difficult to build an alliance with and a partnership with. So I always try to find something I can relate to, like, hey, we both like control. You know, we both like control, so I get it. Whose agenda is it? Is this their agenda? Is it your agenda? Is it the place's agenda? I always hate that one. You know, well, that's just the rules. That's the way we do it around here. I don't know about you. If you say that, don't you laugh at yourself when you go, well, that's just the policy? Does that ever make you kind of go like, it is the policy, but doesn't that make you just go like, I can't believe I'm the person saying this. At least that's what I do. I'm not going to be the person saying this. Is it your will versus their will? If you are burning out because you're in these struggles with everybody, or many people, or certain people, look at yourself first. What part do you play in? Right? What need are you fulfilling that you need things to be the way? When my son was 8 years old, went to my office and I sat in my leather chair and he sat on the couch and he said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I talk to people about their feelings and I try to make them feel better." And he said, "Oh, you tell them jokes?" I was like, "Well, sometimes, but not really. I listen to how they feel and I help them work through it." So he said, "Let's trade." So he sat in the leather chair and I sat on the couch and he goes, "What is your problem?" And I said, "People frustrate me and I lose my temper." And he said, "Well, you need to understand," he said, "first, take a breath." I like that. "You need to understand that people, you can't change people. You can't change anybody." And I thought, wow, that's pretty good at 8 years old. I'm still working on that one. Can't change anybody. What? You know, I'm still trying to do it. It does not work. He's got that figured out. That's why he's a happy guy in film school. Oh, like he's not going to change anybody with films, right? So he's working on a whole other level. You have to stay physically safe, obviously, when people get irritated. Their arm's length away from them. Think about that. Hard to do if you're a CNA, but you have to try to stay that. An open stance, which is if a person, can you stand up for just a second? Oh, awesome. Come over here. So, you know, like you're angry and you're telling, or no, I'm angry. How about that? And I'm telling you off. And we do this, right? Like I'm here and I'm telling you off and you're right there, right? Yeah. And this is confrontational. So the thing I suggest is if you get in one of these, try to step out of it a bit, like this. Like, or no, here, this way. Like just this way. So it's what we're talking like this now. We're more relaxed immediately. And if I come into this, you just keep trying to stay out of it a little bit. Yeah, so it doesn't feel as much like a confrontation. That just feels like a confrontation, right? But if you step out of it a little bit into this open stance when a person's talking, one, you have a chance to run a little easier. But also, it just feels more relaxed. So what you're doing is you're saying physically, like, I'm not standing my ground and, you know, now we're going to escalate. Instead, you're saying, like, I'll back off and I'm listening to you. You know, so it can be a little bit. It's just a little bit of an open stance. Thanks. Yeah. Good job. Sometimes you have to try to use a calming but firm tone. That's not easy, right? It's a tone that isn't condescending. You try to find that right sweet spot of being firm like an authoritarian. You're authoritative, but you're calming. So it just means, you know, this is important, I'm your business, but, and it's not sing-songy. That's a hard one, but that sometimes takes some work. I have the voice of authority, which I've learned because I've been at places where, remember once we got in the elevator, crowded elevator, and someone said, "Where are we going?" And I said something like, "We're all going down." And I just meant the bottom button has been pushed. We're all going down. But I didn't say, "We're all going down." I said, "We're all going down," or something. And the way I said it sounded like, holy crap. Like they all looked at each other like I was going to murder them or something. So you know, that voice of authority, you got to be careful about. You just got to, what a lot of these are sort of check yourself. You know, like what do you naturally do that might be a part of it? You never want to touch the resident unless, you know, when they're angry. Try to remove items of danger if they're angry. Remove other residents as opposed to trying to remove them. A lot of times when people escalate, we're going to try to move them, and then you're going to get slugged. And I've known a lot of places where people got their arms broken because we're going to move them out of the way. We got to get them out of the way and into their room. Forget that. Let them stay there. Let's move everybody else out of the way. Don't corner somebody. So, When escalation occurs, it usually occurs because people don't feel heard. They don't feel understood. So you're going to identify what they're feeling, not argue the point. Listening does not include defending or explaining. Listening is just hearing them out. And sometimes it's parroting back what they say. You sound pretty frustrated. To which they go, well, yeah, I feel frustrated. You know, and you go, yeah, I hear that. You're really angry. That just says, I get it. So you try to provide sincere understanding. It depends on where you come from, too. I'm not a joiner. I'm kind of anti-establishment. Psychologists are behavior change people. We're rebels, you know. So I'm already set up in a way mindset-wise for when people are like against the system and against the man. You know, I'm not going to do what this place tells me to do. I'm like, I'm down with that. I don't know if you're getting out. but I get it. So some of that might just be like, I get it. You're really angry. You're on strike. You're not going to do anything. And then I just let it sit. And sometimes they'll be like, well, but I have to do something, right? I have to do something. I can't just sit here. Now you help them change. You help them now. Because you sided with them as opposed to gave them something to, you know, sit in the corner and fight your position. Anyway, yeah. So get toward the end here. Providing sincere understanding, suspending agreement. This is number one, you have to diffuse anger before you can resolve conflict. We usually try to go right for this, but then this just keeps escalating. So we usually have to try to like, let me hear this, okay, I can tell you're really angry. We can't really work on this other thing. Just tell me about what's getting you so angry. And let's talk about the anger. A lot of times eliminating the challenging behavior is not a reachable goal. So I've got somebody right now who they keep calling me about, not here, another place, and they want me to just make them stop. But it's a path, it's a road. A lot of people who have difficult personalities and challenging behavior, it's like diabetes, you have to manage it. You have to keep working on it. It's like losing weight, keep working on it. You can't just eliminate and fix the problem. Right. So that a lot of times is my thought is that you can't really have that as a goal. Like, well, why doesn't she just stop? Make her stop. We really can't do that. So the goal has to be to better manage the difficult behavior. And it is tough because you can have someone who does something challenging 800 times a day, and then with the right behavior program and the right meds and the right responses and staff approaches, you get it down to 300 times a day, and people will still say, it's not working, but it is working. It just, 300's a lot of times still to do it. So that's it. That's my thoughts about all of that. Any ideas, thoughts, rebuttals, comments, better suggestions? No?
Not a good ideas.
Thank you. So hopefully there's some practical ideas there to put in your tool belt. Make sure you get the handout and just try some of that way of thinking. And it takes, especially the validation part of I'm going to hear you and I'm going to suspend whether I agree or not. Just that piece, if you try that, that is the most impactful thing in your life, in a way, in relationships, is, so how do I, and it's the challenge, which is, they're upset, now they've got me upset, how do I back out of that, take a breath, and figure out how to understand where they're coming from, so that we can calm down, and then get back on track.
Something that you said last time when we had our training prior to COVID that always kind of rode with me since then. You said you can always leave their world, they have to stay in it.
Yeah.
I always think that.
I think about that a lot, and I also think about that just in micro ways, like just I can leave the room, I could take a breath. I just have to not make it like a thing, like,
Yeah.
all right then. And then and I'm like,
Yeah.
make a point of leaving, you know, it's like, more like, I hear you, I try to figure out a way to make them save face.
Yeah.
But you're right, they're
Yeah,
stuck
sometimes
in,
I'll just be like, can I get you anything? Oh, I wanna go grab you some orange juice.
yeah, right, something like that. It's really good if you can do that because maintaining the relationship is paramount.
Yeah.
Relationships should always be above the goal. Whatever the goal is that they need to be doing and you're trying to get them to do, the relationship should be above that,
Yeah.
right? So we may not get this all done right now, but are we okay?
Yeah.
And they're doing stuff deliberately at times that would make it very challenging to be okay with each other. So you're trying to overlook all that so that you can continue. It's sort of like, and therapists do this a lot because people come in who have dysfunctional relationships, right? So they may have a history throughout their life of the same kind of dysfunction and screwed up relationships and things that are going wrong. And with me, they've got to see the possibility of a good relationship. But they're having a bad relationship, you know, calling me up, telling me that they're going to kill themselves 3 minutes before it's time to end the session. You know, stuff that's challenging, right? I was about leaving the room. Now they're going to kill themselves. They weren't going to kill themselves for an hour, but now they're going to kill them, you know. So eventually, I have to always think about, like, us maintaining a good relationship is more important than whether right now we get this goal accomplished. That's the hope. It's not always easy to do, and you're going to fail. And I think I fail a lot, an awful lot. I remember something a professor said to me years ago that I stick with me, which is, with all these techniques, they're tools. They're like little hats. You're in a hat shop, and they're trying hats on. 25 hats, one might fit, right? One's like, this is the hat. But the other 24, you had to try them on to find out that didn't work. So I think about that a lot. Techniques, I'm just throwing out techniques. Some of them work. Next time, a different group work, especially with demented people. You know, like all of a sudden you're thinking like, I know what's going to work with Mildred. And you go in there and it doesn't work. Either Mildred caught on, or you didn't do it the same way, or the mood is different. So then you just have to have a toolbox of them, and then you keep trying them. And sometimes you're going to get frustrated, because to do caregiving, you have to be all in. You have to do it with your heart. If you do it well. I'm kind of mid-career now, I guess, toward the end, maybe. I don't know, mid-career. And I was in a group of people who were young psychologists, mid-career psychologists who are in the thick of it, and retired psychologists. And I said, wow, after 25 years of doing this, I would have thought I'd be much more cynical and cold. And even though I am sarcastic, I'm much more closer to, like I said, crying and being emotional and taking it home with me. I didn't do that when I was 30, but I do now. And I said, I didn't expect that at all, that I would be so emotionally impacted by this. And they said, that's because you're doing it right. It's the only way to do it. It's like how you can fall in love. You got to do it with your heart, right? So that's why it's tough. That's why it's tough. So maybe next time we'll talk about caregiver resilience. And I'm not to burn out. All right? Anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Good luck to you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.